Wolfe was dictating about the mating habits of orchids. Fritz was clattering in the kitchen with enough dignity to make it music, and I was taking shorthand I had no intention of typing. The morning had all the usual trimmings: coffee, contentment, and Wolfe's voice floating across the office like a low baritone practicing indifference. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't the polite one-ring sort of visit that fits business hours. It was a long, nervous press that made the sound vibrate clear through the rug. Wolfe stopped mid-sentence and scowled at the bell pull as if it had just insulted the Republic of Montenegro. "Confound it," he said. "Archie." "On my way." I pushed back from the desk. Routine equilibrium meet its first casualty. At the door, nobody was in sight. Only the smell of rain from the street and my fedora, hanging on the rack, slightly askew. When I straightened it, something crackled under the brim. I reached in and pulled out a small folded note, pencil-scratched and damp at the corners. "If you value your life, burn this hat." I'd have laughed if it didn't sound so definite. I turned it over. No signature, no initials. Just that one line pretending to be advice. The bell hadn't lied. Whoever left it had nerves, but not patience. Back in the office, Wolfe was glaring at the orchids as though they'd interrupted him personally. "What now?" he asked. "Fan mail," I said, handing him the note. Anonymous and flammable. He adjusted his glasses, read it, and grunted something between annoyance and mild curiosity. "Burn it." "Literal or symbolic?" "Neither." "Sit." I did, watching him hold the note like it was a specimen under glass. His nose twitched. He could smell mystery the way Fritz smelled béarnaise. "Describe," he said. "Found under my hat." No envelope, written in pencil, small hand, slanted right. The ink, or graphite, is smudged from moisture, which tells me our writer came in from the rain, planted it, and vanished. Or was thrown out, Wolfe murmured. "Fritz." Fritz appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands. "Yes, Mr. Wolfe?" "Any visitors?" "No one, sir. I was in the kitchen preparing your lamb kidneys." "Then a trespass," Wolfe said. "Someone entered, left this—" He lifted the note delicately. "And departed unseen." Observe, Archie. The folds are precise, the pressure of the pencil inconsistent. A woman's hand, anxious but deliberate. Anxious enough to warn me to torch my hat. Maybe she thinks I wear dynamite. He ignored that. "Where was the hat?" "On the rack by the front door." "Then our caller opened the door, knew it was yours, and took the risk of entering my house to place it. Why?" "Maybe because telegram rates went up." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Because she believes the warning urgent enough to outweigh trespass. Fetch the hat." I went, grabbed it, and brought it back. He inspected it like a jeweler appraising a cheap diamond. "No residue, no odor of chemicals. The message is therefore metaphorical." "Meaning somebody plans to ventilate the owner." He grunted assent. "Who knew you would wear that hat today?" "Only me, and the hat." "Imbecile," he said softly, which from Wolfe is almost affection. Before I could sharpen my comeback, the phone rang. Fritz moved toward it, but Wolfe raised a finger. "No, Archie." I crossed the room and lifted the receiver. Nero Wolfe's office. A woman's voice came through, low, urgent, the kind that already knew it was in trouble. "Mr. Goodwin, you found my note." "That depends. Are you the one trying to save my life or end it?" A pause. Then, "Both, perhaps. Please, don't leave the house. I'm on my way." Click. Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Well?" "She's on her way here." He leaned back, the scowl giving way to something that looked suspiciously like interest. "Then, Archie, you may keep your hat. For the moment it appears to be bait." The rain hadn't slowed, and neither had Wolfe's curiosity. I was halfway to the door when his voice followed me like a leash. "Observe before you open," he said. I cracked it an inch. A woman's outline waited beyond the glass, hat, gloves, and the kind of poise you only get by practicing fear. She lifted her head as if she'd heard me breathing. "Mr. Goodwin?" "Depends who's asking. I'm the one who left the note." That put her in a special category. People who don't knock until after they've broken in. I swung the door wider. "Then come explain why you're auditioning for Ghost of the Week." She stepped inside, rain trailing from her coat in narrow silver lines. The look in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was calculation cut with worry. Fritz's reflection passed in the hall mirror, clutching a towel like a weapon. "It's all right," I told him. "No invasion, just confession." He disappeared. She stayed, composed but trembling at the edges. "Mr. Wolfe is expecting no one," I said, "but I'll risk it." Wolfe didn't rise when we entered. He never does unless the earth tilts. He regarded her as though she'd arrived late for an interrogation already underway. "Miss Carruthers, Helen Carruthers." "Ah, the author of our inflammatory stationery." Her hands tightened on her purse. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I meant to warn Mr. Goodwin." "That distinction," Wolfe said, "is purely semantic. Proceed." She drew a breath. "My brother, John Carruthers, worked for the Larimore Import Company. 3 nights ago he was found dead. The police call it accidental gas poisoning. I call it murder." That word rearranged the air. Wolfe tilted his head, calculating. "Evidence." "Only absence. His leather notebook is missing. He carried it everywhere. Records of shipments, payments, clients. The police said thieves must have taken it, but there was money left in his wallet." Wolfe's fingers drummed once. "And you wrote to warn Mr. Goodwin because my brother said if anything happened, a message would reach you." "To me?" I asked. "We never met." "He admired your cases," she said. "He told me once, if anything goes wrong, Wolfe and Goodwin will understand. So when I realized someone might be following me, I panicked. I had to make contact discreetly." "So you slipped into the house and tucked a threat under my hat," I said. "Subtle." Her mouth quivered into half a smile. "It worked," Wolfe grunted. "You observed no one entering or leaving?" "No one. Just the street, wet and empty." Wolfe shifted, which for him was equal to pacing for normal men. "Describe your follower." "Tall, grey raincoat, hat brim low. I saw him near my building last night, and again this morning." "Coincidence is the refuge of fools," Wolfe muttered. "Archie, have we any proof she was indeed observed?" "Not yet," I said, "but I can start collecting." She looked between us, voice quickening. "You'll take the case?" "I will consider it," Wolfe said. "But before I agree, Miss Carruthers, I require a tangible cause." She opened her purse and produced a folded memo, edges smoothed by anxiety. Wolfe beckoned. I handed it over. "To J. Carruthers. Forward all documentation on shipment 47A. To Mr. M. Dane. Copy to E. Larimore." "Typed," Wolfe noted. "But the signature by pen, Eldred Larimore. Your employer?" "Yes. And Monsieur Dane joined only recently. After my brother's death, no one has seen him. Perhaps because he does not exist." Her eyes widened. "You think the name's false?" "I think we shall soon know." The phone rang. Wolfe's eyebrows climbed a notch. "Archie." I picked it up. "Nero Wolfe's office." A rough male voice. "Tell Goodwin to mind his hat. Next time it won't be a note." Click. I kept the receiver a second longer, listening to nothing. "Who?" Wolfe asked. "Anonymous admirer. Promises me promotion. To deceased." Miss Carruthers went pale. Wolfe regarded the phone as if it had sneezed. How charmingly direct. I set the receiver down. "So now we've got a body, a missing notebook, and someone auditioning for executioner. What's next?" "Next," Wolfe said, "we verify her story. Archie, Telephone Inspector Kramer. That earned him a glare. You want to start with the fireworks? Better that than end with them. Tell him to come, informally. Kramer arrived 20 minutes later, trailing cigar smoke and skepticism. Rain slicked his coat to a color between rust and resentment. All right, Wolfe, he growled. What's the circus? I gestured. Meet Miss Carruthers. She believes her brother's death wasn't as accidental as your report suggests. Kramer grunted. Everybody's got a theory when insurance is due. She's got more than theory, I said. She's got a stalker and a phone threat. That made him pause. You get the call? Live and exclusive? He pulled a notepad. Number? Blocked, voice gravelly. Could have been local. Kramer scribbled, then turned to the woman. We checked your brother's flat. Nothing missing but that notebook. Her hands clenched. You did know about it? We know about everything, he said. Except why it mattered. Then perhaps, Wolfe cut in, you should ask why a woman who feared for her life risked entering my home instead of yours. Confidence, Inspector, is currency. She has spent hers wisely. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You always did enjoy calling me a pauper. What's your angle? Curiosity, Wolfe said, and professional disgust. Gas leaks rarely make phone calls. Kramer exhaled smoke and irritation. Fine, but if she's right and someone's playing with murder, it stays on my desk. Understood? Perfectly, Wolfe said. Archie will assist you, discreetly. That was my cue to sigh. Great. I'll bring donuts. Kramer pocketed his pad and aimed a look at Miss Carruthers that almost counted as sympathy. Keep your door locked. If anyone shadows you, call me, not these philosophers. He left as abruptly as he'd come. The sound of the outer door closing gave the brownstone its silence back. Miss Carruthers' shoulders dropped. He doesn't believe me. Kramer believes only in paperwork, I said, but he's useful, sometimes by accident. Wolfe poured beer, the ritual restoring gravity to the room. Miss Carruthers, until we discern the motive, you will act as though you believe Inspector Kramer's theory. Appear unconcerned. Whoever telephoned will grow impatient and reveal himself. That sounds dangerous. Indeed, Archie will accompany you. Me? I said. To what? Serve as target practice? Precisely. Observation is safest when the observer is bait. She opened her mouth to object. I cut her off. Don't worry, I'm used to being irresistible to bullets. That almost earned a smile. Wolfe set down his glass. Archie, you will escort her home. Note every vehicle, every pedestrian within 2 blocks. If anyone displays persistence, invite conversation. Politely. Preferably alive. He handed me the folded note again. Keep this with you. Its graphite residue may yet speak. I pocketed it, grabbed my hat, the controversial one, and opened the door. The rain was still performing its same dull percussion on the steps. She joined me, umbrella trembling in her grip. Mr. Goodwin, thank you. For what? For not laughing at me. Give me time, I said, stepping into the downpour. I'm still collecting data. As we reached the street, a taxi idled half a block away, engine purring like something waiting to be summoned. I felt the hair on my neck register the temperature of coincidence. Cab's early, I muttered. Did you call one? She asked. No. The headlights flared once, a quick flash like acknowledgement. Wolfe's words echoed behind my oar. If the bullet is meant for your hat? I touched the brim and smiled thinly. Stay close, Miss Carruthers. I think your shadow brought transportation. The cab didn't move when we stepped off the curb, which was all the invitation I needed to get cautious. The driver sat behind the wheel like a wax figure, hands steady, face turned our way but hiding under the visor. I raised my arm halfway just to see if he'd flinch. He didn't. Friendly neighborhood chauffeur? Miss Carruthers asked, her voice tight. Maybe. Or maybe the audience. I nudged her back toward the building wall where the awning kept most of the rain off. Hold still. I walked forward slow, making it look like I wanted the ride. The cab's engine idled with the patience of a cat watching a mouse think. I got close enough to see that the license plate was splattered with mud. Intentionally. Evening, I said. You waiting on someone? No answer. He just turned the ignition off. The sudden silence felt heavier than the rain. I leaned to look at his face and saw it wasn't the drivers that bothered me. It was the absence of eyes. Sunglasses. In a downpour. At night. That's either fashion suicide or a message. I gripped the door handle, yanked it open, and found the seat empty. The car was running without a driver. That pulled the rug out from under common sense. Miss Carruthers gasped behind me. He was just there. Sure, I said, and Houdini was just an amateur. Inside the cab, the back seat was clean except for a folded newspaper. I picked it up with 2 fingers. The top headline was about a dock explosion in Newark. A red pencil line circled a smaller story halfway down. Warehouse fire destroys customs records. Officials investigating possible fraud. I whistled low. Your brother's imports? She nodded. Larimore handles shipments through that port. That was one connection too neat for chance. I closed the door, and the engine started again by itself, gear clicking into neutral like it had been rehearsed. That was my cue to let it drive wherever it wanted, without me in it. The cab rolled off, blending into the mist like a rumor. I turned to her. If that was a coincidence, it just winked at us. Her hands trembled on the umbrella. Should we go back inside? Not yet. Wolfe would want the dots before the line. I led her to my sedan, parked down the block. The rain made a drumming solo on the roof as we got in. I started the engine and looked around the wet street, nothing but the gleam of lights on asphalt. Still, that cab had left a scent of purpose in the air. She was quiet until we turned the corner. You think the Ahmabad notebook is in those records? Could be. But if someone went to the trouble of burning a warehouse, they didn't do it for warmth. We drove 3 blocks before she spoke again. You don't believe in accidents either, do you? I'm in the business of disbelief, I said. Keeps me employed. Her reflection in the window looked like another person, colder, smaller. John must have found something that proved fraud at the company. Maybe they killed him to bury it. And you? I was his emergency contact. He told me once, if I'm gone, they'll come to you next. That earned a shiver that even the heater couldn't argue with. I steered toward Lexington, keeping an eye on the mirrors. The night was too empty to be innocent. 2 turns later, a pair of headlights slipped into view behind us. Steady, not close enough for traffic. I didn't say anything yet. She didn't need to know until I knew, but the timing was right. Too right. When we stopped at a red light, I leaned back casually. The car behind us stopped too, exactly 1 length away. Its silhouette was a dark sedan, older model. Nothing fancy. The driver's face was a blank space behind rain-specked glass. Miss Carruthers, I said, keeping my tone conversational. Do me a favor. Reach into the glove box. She obeyed, pulling out the revolver Wolfe insists I carry when he's feeling paternal. Her hand shook as she passed it over. Don't worry, I said, tucking it into my coat. I only shoot people when they insist. The light turned green. I took the next corner fast, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The sedan followed, smooth as choreography. That did it. I cut through 2 side streets and pulled into a narrow alley behind a bakery. The smell of yeast and old rain greeted us. I killed the lights. The other car rolled past the intersection slowly, headlights sweeping over the brick. I counted heartbeats, 5, 6, and watched it vanish. She exhaled like she'd been holding her lungs for rent. Was that him? Whoever him is, he's auditioning for the role. When we got back on the main road, I aimed toward her apartment on 74th. The lobby light was still on when we arrived, which was at least 1 point for the universe. I followed her in, keeping behind just enough to watch every angle. The elevator was an antique that coughed its way to the 4th floor. Her place was neat, modest, full of small comforts, flowers, photographs, books. But what drew my eye wasn't on the furniture. It was on the table near the window, where a small cardboard box sat half open. Inside was another hat. Men's, brown felt, water-stained. I touched the brim. "Your brother's?" "Yes," she said quietly. "The police returned it with his things." The way she looked at it made me understand she hadn't had the nerve to open the box before. She watched while I turned it over carefully. Something crinkled. Inside the lining, I pulled at the edge and found a slip of paper folded twice. "Shipment 47A, Dock 9, Night Watcher." I showed it to her. "Looks like your brother hid his secret in a family tradition." Her hand went to her mouth. "That's his writing." I took the note to the light. The pencil marks were faint, same graphite pressure as the one from my hat. Same hand, same angle. "He was trying to leave a breadcrumb," I said. "The kind people step over until it's too late." Before she could answer, something thudded against the door. Not a knock, a solid impact, as if someone tested the lock with their shoulder. She froze. I motioned her behind the couch and moved to the side of the door. Another thump, then silence. "Who is it?" I called. No answer. Then footsteps retreating down the hall, quick, wet, unhurried. I waited a beat, then opened the door. The corridor was empty except for a single envelope lying face up on the floor. The paper was damp, addressed in the same slanted handwriting, "Miss Carruthers." I tore it open. Inside was a single sentence. "You were warned not to dig." She read it over my shoulder and swayed. "He knows we found it." "Correction," I said. "He thinks we're scared." I pocketed the letter, which gives us about 6 hours before he tries to make it true. Her face was white, but her voice was steady. "What do we do?" "We call Wolfe. He'll be happier than a cat with a new puzzle." I dialed from her phone, told Fritz to put me through. Wolfe answered, his voice as calm as the marble bust he occasionally resembles. "Well, we've got a message, a tale, and the late Mr. Carruthers' hat carrying a secret note about Dock 9. Whoever's playing this game doesn't like witnesses." "Splendid," he said. "You will remain there. I shall arrange for Mr. Saul Panzer to join you. Do not attempt heroics until the morning." "That's my worst habit," I said. "Indeed." He hung up. I turned back to Miss Carruthers. "We've got backup on the way." She nodded, gripping her coat tighter. "And if they come before he does?" "Then we'll introduce them properly," I said. "But if the man in grey knocks again, I'm the one answering." Outside, thunder grumbled like it wanted a seat in the audience. The street lamp flickered through the window, glinting on the brim of that old hat on the table. Somewhere between the warning and the echo of those footsteps, I realized the case wasn't about my hat anymore. It was about the man who wanted every clue burned to ash before morning. She hadn't moved since I hung up, and the silence in that apartment could have been bottled and sold as tension concentrate. The lights hummed, the rain stitched faint threads across the window, and the old hat sat on the table like a relic with bad intentions. I pulled the curtains together and checked the hallway through the peephole. Nothing but wallpaper and nerves. "Saul will be here inside the hour," I said. "He's the sort who can spot a shadow even when it forgets to exist." Miss Carruthers nodded, but her hands were twisting her handkerchief like it owed her money. "I keep thinking, he must know I went to you, that I brought you into it. If he didn't before, the note on your doormat probably handled the introductions." I kept my tone light. "We'll let him believe he's ahead. That kind of confidence makes killers clumsy. She looked at me then, and something in her face had shifted, fear giving room to anger. My brother wasn't a fool. He found something worth killing for. I want whoever did it to answer. Then you hired the right oversized genius, I said. He doesn't rest until a liar runs out of breath. A knock startled both of us. Not hard, but quick and familiar. I checked the peephole again. Saul Panzer stood in the hall, shoulders hunched in his trench coat, eyes already reading the air. I let him in. "Evening," he said, voice soft as ever. "Nice neighborhood if you like your wallpaper nervous." I shut the door. "Wolfe filled you in?" "Mostly. Hat, note, stalker. All very haberdashery noir." He looked toward Miss Carruthers and tipped his hat politely. "Ma'am." She nodded, too tired to bother with words. Saul's eyes took in the room the way Wolfe takes in a confession. Slow, thorough, without blinking. "You check the stairwell." "Not yet." He opened the door again, scanned left, then right, stepped out, and returned in 30 seconds. "No one standing watch, but the elevator cables are damp. Means someone went down recently, maybe just before I got here." I frowned. "You came in from the street?" "Rear entrance." "Habit." I could have hugged him for that if I weren't allergic to sentiment. "Good," I said. "We've got at least one piece of live bait, one unknown fisherman, and a line leading to Dock 9. Saul nodded once. "Then we don't wait for daylight. We move." Miss Carruthers blinked. "Now?" "But Mr. Wolfe said—" "I know what he said," I interrupted. "He also said not to attempt heroics, and I never do, unless there's an audience." Saul's mouth quirked. "Wolfe will bark when he finds out. He'll purr once we bring back proof." I grabbed my coat, gestured for Saul to keep the lights low, and we headed out. Miss Carruthers followed, clutching her purse as though it contained the Constitution. The hallway smelled of old paint and cheaper perfume. At the corner, Saul paused to listen. "Elevator's back on ground floor," he murmured. "We take the stairs." By the time we reached the lobby, the night had thickened. The doorman was gone, and the street outside looked washed clean of witnesses. My sedan waited under the curb light, patient as ever. We climbed in, Saul taking the back to watch the mirrors. I eased into traffic. Dock 9's, about 15 minutes if the lights behave. "They won't," Saul said. Tailed 2 cars back, black Packard, same one from the corner of 73rd. I didn't ask how he knew. Saul's instincts are GPS before satellites were born. I kept the speed steady, eyes on the drizzle ahead. Miss Carruthers whispered, "What will they do if we stop?" "Depends how shy they are," I said. "If they've got orders to scare, we get honked at. If they've got orders to finish, we find out fast." Her breath caught. I kept mine casual. The city rolled by, wet pavement, glowing storefronts, the smell of diesel and trouble. At the next intersection, Saul leaned forward. "Take Canal Street, right turn, then cut through the market lanes." I did. The Packard followed, one turn late, but still there. When we hit the warehouse district, street lamps thinned out and the fog thickened. I slowed by instinct. Puddles here were deep enough to baptize a Buick. "Dock 9's 2 blocks down," Saul said. "Let's not make it a parade," I told him. "We park and walk." He agreed with a quiet nod. I pulled into a gap beside a freight office, killed the engine, and let the silence soak in. The Packard cruised past and didn't stop. "Smart," I said. "They want us to go first." Saul drew a small flashlight, hooded it with his fingers. "Let's earn the invitation." The 3 of us moved through the rain-slick maze toward the docks. The river wind brought the smell of iron, salt, and secrecy. Crates stood stacked like forgotten tombstones. At the far end, one warehouse still had power, a dim bulb glowing above the door marked "No Entry." Miss Carruthers stopped short. That's where John worked his last shift. Figures, I said. Murderers never appreciate irony. Saul crouched near the door, inspecting the padlock. Fresh marks. Someone's been inside tonight. I held the light while he eased the shackle loose with a trick only Saul and locksmiths know. The door groaned open just wide enough for us to slip through. Inside, the air was thick with oil and mildew. A single hanging lamp swayed overhead, throwing shadows that liked to move too much. Crates were stacked in uneven rows, many stenciled with foreign addresses and customs tags half torn. Shipment 47A, Saul murmured. He pointed at a crate label with that number faintly visible under water stains. I knelt beside it, ran my fingers along the wood, and felt something jammed into the gap of the planks. Paper. I eased it free. It was a customs declaration, crumpled but legible. The manifest listed expensive European wine but was stamped with a freight code belonging to industrial chemicals. Fraud, plain and simple. Your brother found this, I said to Miss Carruthers. She nodded shakily. He said someone was smuggling under false manifests. Then he knew too much and tried to talk. Saul turned suddenly, light catching the far wall. Archie, footprints. 2 sets, heading out the side door. Before I could respond, the lamp above us flickered. A second later, metal slammed somewhere near the exit. A door snapping shut. We froze. Saul's voice was barely breath. They're sealing us in. I moved fast, pushing Miss Carruthers behind a stack of crates. The sound of footsteps came closer. 2 men, one heavier than the other. I caught the faint jingle of keys, then a low murmur. They shouldn't have come. Saul's gun was already out, his eyes narrowed. I whispered, "Wait, let them talk." The heavier voice grunted. "Boss says burn the papers, all of it. Nobody checks ashes." That was motivation enough for me. I stepped from behind the crates, gun leveled. "You boys taking inventory or just redecorating?" They spun. The shorter one bolted for the door. Saul fired once, the shot smacking into the wall above his head, enough persuasion to make him stop. The heavier man froze, hands half raised. "We're just night watch." "Sure," I said, "and I'm the tooth fairy." I moved closer, eyes steady on his. "You work for Larimore or Dane?" He blinked. "I don't." "Wrong answer." Saul stepped in, frisked him, and came up with a folded envelope stuffed with cash. The outer bill bore Larimore's company stamp. "That settles employer loyalty," I said. Miss Carruthers emerged, trembling but defiant. "You killed my brother." The man swallowed. "Lady, I didn't touch him. Dane gave the order. We just followed through." "Where's Dane now?" I asked. He stared at the floor. "Warehouse on Pier 12. He said he'd clean the rest tonight." Saul shoved him toward the wall, binding his wrists with wire from a crate seal. The smaller one didn't argue. Fear had already done the talking. I turned to Miss Carruthers. "You still want answers? We're going to get them, but Wolfe's going to hate this timing." She met my eyes. "Then let's not waste it." Outside, the rain had turned to mist, the kind that hides everything worth finding. Saul glanced at his watch. "We move fast, or we lose him." "Then we move," I said, tightening my grip on the revolver. "Pier 12's waiting." We didn't waste the rain. It covered footsteps and questions both. Saul took point, keeping to the shadows as we crossed toward Pier 12. Miss Carruthers followed close behind me. Silent now, face pale but set. The river wind cut through the fog, carrying that metallic tang that always means unfinished business. The docks stretched ahead, row after row of warehouses. Most dark, one still leaking light through the seams. Saul motioned with 2 fingers. "That's our place." The building was newer than the others, all steel siding and arrogance, with a side office jutting like a wart. A single car was parked near the loading ramp. A black Packard, the same one that had followed us. I exhaled slow. Guess we've found the audience section. Saul crouched beside a crate, eyes never stopping. Two men inside, voices near the windows. One of them's Dane. You sure? Tone's right. I've heard that kind of money before mercy voice. Miss Carruthers whispered. What if they have more inside? Then we leave politely, I said. Feet first only if they insist. We slipped along the wall, using the stacks of barrels as cover. Through a broken pane, I caught sight of two men by a table littered with ledgers and a half-empty bottle. One was tall, narrow-faced, wearing an overcoat too fine for warehouse work. The other was built like someone who earned his pay carrying regrets. The tall one, Dane, was speaking. We move the last shipment tonight. Once that's gone, Larimore's signature won't matter. The other man grunted. And the girl. She was supposed to keep quiet. If she talks, we tidy up. Miss Carruthers stiffened beside me. Saul's hand caught her wrist before sound followed. I gestured her back and eased closer to the glass. Dane poured a drink, lifted it like a toast. To loose ends, cut before they strangle. Saul's mouth twitched. Real poet. I nodded toward the side door. We go in quick. 2 targets. I'll take the talker. He didn't argue. We split, circled to the side entrance. The lock was cheap. Saul had it open in a heartbeat. The hinges complained softly as we stepped in. The smell of alcohol and printer ink hit me first. Dane turned, eyes narrowing, glass still in his hand. The big man reached for his coat pocket. Saul's gun was faster. I said, "Don't spoil the party. We brought our own invitations." Dane's voice stayed even. "Goodwin, isn't it? I hoped Wolfe would send you. He always did enjoy a proxy war." "That's flattering," I said. "You planning to surrender, or do we skip to post-mortem questions?" He smiled, a thin, bored line. "You're out of your depth, Goodwin. You have no idea what's moving through these docks." "Try me." He placed the glass down with care. "Half the cargo you see here goes out labeled as fine Bordeaux. Inside are refined solvents, illegal imports worth 10 times the duty. Your late friend Carruthers discovered it. I advised restraint. He didn't listen. And you solved it with carbon monoxide." He shrugged. "Gas leaves no witnesses." Miss Carruthers' voice cut through the air, sharp and trembling. "You killed him yourself, didn't you?" Dane turned his head, finally noticing her. "Ah, the sister. You should have taken my advice. I sent the note." That pushed my patience to its last nickel. "You're a regular Good Samaritan. Maybe you'd like to autograph your confession." His hand slid toward his coat again, but I was already moving. The gun came out of his pocket, but my arm caught his wrist and slammed it against the table. The shot went wide, hitting the crate behind us. Saul had the other man down before the echo died. Dane tried to twist free. I leaned in hard, breath close to his ear. "Don't make me explain the next part with bullets." He stilled, jaw tight. Saul cuffed the big man with a coil of wire and nodded. "They're both breathing." I kept my gun on Dane. "You're going to tell me where the last shipment's headed?" His eyes gleamed, all confidence and venom. "You think you've stopped it?" "There's a freighter leaving in 30 minutes. Dock 9, same manifest. Once it's gone, no one will find proof." "That depends who's doing the finding." I turned to Saul. "Get Kramer." He smirked faintly. "That'll make Wolfe's morning." "Exactly." Miss Carruthers had come closer, watching Dane like she wanted him to stop existing through sheer will. "You'll pay for this." He laughed once. "So will you." That was enough for me. "We're done talking." I nodded to Saul, who stepped behind him with efficient calm and shoved him into a chair. I found the nearest telephone, dusty but working, and called Wolfe. He answered before the second ring. "Well, your hunch was gold, We've got Dane, one accomplice, and a warehouse full of illegal freight labeled as wine. We also have a freighter scheduled to erase the evidence in half an hour." "I commend your initiative," Wolfe said dryly. Inspector Kramer is en route with his usual enthusiasm. "Hold the criminals. Keep Miss Carruthers intact. That last part's priority." "I should hope so. Return with the facts when the sea calms." He hung up, leaving me with the sound of rain and criminals breathing. Saul gave a low whistle. "You think Kramer'll make it before that ship leaves?" "I don't," I said, "which means we're taking a field trip." Miss Carruthers stared at me. "You're not serious." "Deadly. Dane here's going to give us clearance to board." Her eyes flicked to him, then back to me. "He'll never—" "He will," I said, pressing the revolver against his sleeve. "Won't you, Mr. Dane?" For the first time, he lost a bit of that boardroom composure. "You can't bluff your way onto a shipping vessel." "Watch me." Saul tightened the ropes. "I'll keep the muscle until Kramer arrives." "Good. And if he wakes up singing, take notes." Miss Carruthers followed me out into the drizzle. The Packard was still waiting, keys in the ignition, as if the universe wanted to make amends for earlier. I slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and steered toward the river lights. "You shouldn't risk this," she said quietly. "Ma'am, I risk things for a living. It's when nothing's dangerous that I get nervous." The fog thickened, swallowing the streets in wet cotton. At the next turn, we could see Dock 9 ahead. Cranes silhouetted, engines humming, a freighter's outline barely visible through mist. Men moved along the gangway, shoving barrels onto the deck. 30 minutes, I muttered. That's one generous deadline. I parked behind a line of trucks, scanned the scene. A guard in a slicker patrolled near the ramp, cigarette glowing like a firefly. I found Dane's ID card in his wallet. Dock authorization. Photo included. The face was close enough to pass in bad lighting. I showed it to her. "Looks like I'm borrowing his membership." Her hand caught my sleeve. "Be careful. Always. Just don't define it too closely." I stepped into the fog, coat collar up, hat low. The guard saw me, nodded once, and turned away. Easy. Too easy. Halfway up the gangway, I caught the scent of oil and cold iron and something else, the metallic click of a safety being released. Voices floated through the mist from the deck above. "That you, Dane?" I didn't answer, just kept moving, one hand ready, the note in my pocket pressing like a pulse. Whoever was up there was about to learn that when Nero Wolfe sends Archie Goodwin into the dark, he doesn't go alone. He brings the light back out with teeth marks. The deck boards gave under my shoes with a sound like someone sighing through their teeth. The mist thickened, dampening light and distance alike, but the voice that had called down still hung in it, rough, uncertain, coming closer. I moved sideways into the shadow of a lifeboat and let my eyes adjust. A figure appeared out of the fog, short, thick-set, wearing a dock badge that didn't look borrowed. He held a pistol, low but steady. "Dane?" he asked again, this time sharper. "Depends who's asking," I said, stepping just enough into the light for him to see a silhouette, not a face. He hesitated. "You're late." That gave me an opening wide enough to drive Kramer's temper through. I moved closer, easy and casual. "Traffic," I said, "and a conversation with your employer about loose ends." That last part hit home. His hand dropped a fraction. "He sent you to—" "Supervise," I cut in. "He's worried about schedules." He grunted, half believing it. "Cargo's ready. We load the last crates, sail inside 15. Then let's make it 10. He nodded toward the hold. "Give the boys a hand, then. Captain's itching to go." I followed him toward the hatch, every nerve counting seconds. Inside, the air turned heavy with the smell of tar and wine that wasn't wine. A half-dozen men were stacking barrels marked Bordeaux Extra Reserve, their boots leaving trails in sawdust. None of them looked French or reserved. The foreman barked orders. I played the silent assistant, helping roll one barrel onto the hoist. The weight confirmed what Wolfe had guessed. No liquid, all metal core. Whoever funded this operation wasn't drinking profit. They were smuggling it. The foreman lit a cigarette and glanced at me sideways. Dane said nobody else had come. I gave him Wolfe's brand of calm menace. Then it's your lucky night. I'm nobody. He chuckled, smoke curling from his teeth. Fair enough. While he turned to shout another order, I caught sight of a metal case wedged behind a pile of ropes near the wall. It had a custom seal broken clean across and a faint imprint. 47A. My pulse sped up, the missing cargo from Carruthers' notes. I drifted that way, bent as if tying a bootlace, and slid the case out with one hand. It was lighter than expected. A lock held it shut, small but stubborn. I'd learned from Wolfe that sometimes discretion means using your shoe heel. One hard kick snapped it. Inside were papers, all neatly bound, shipping lists, receipts, ledgers. But on top lay something different. A photo, creased and damp, showing Carruthers shaking hands with Larimore and Dane. Underneath, someone had scrawled in pencil, "Insurance paid in advance." That was the motive wrapped with a bow. Carruthers had proof of the fraud and tried to expose it. Dane had silenced him, then kept the network alive under Larimore's signature. A clatter yanked me back. One of the workers had seen the open case. "Hey, what are you doing?" I straightened, case in hand, gun drawn before the words finished bouncing off the hull. "Checking inventory. It's light on conscience." They froze. The foreman cursed and reached for his jacket. I fired once into the air. The echo made the ship shudder. "Nobody moves," I said. "Except me. I'm leaving with this paperwork, and you're staying sober until the police arrive." They didn't argue. Crooks rarely do when lead punctuation's involved. I backed toward the hatch, eyes on every pair of hands. The foreman tried bravado. "You'll never make it off the dock alive, Goodwin." "Funny," I said. "That's what everyone says before I prove them unimaginative." Outside, the fog wrapped around me like wet cotton. I ran halfway down the gangway before I saw a shape at the pier, Miss Carruthers, standing exactly where I'd told her not to be. Her face was pale, eyes wide. "Get back to the car," I hissed. She didn't move. "There's another man," she whispered, "behind the crates." I turned, fast. A figure broke from the shadows near the loading crane. A tall man in a slicker, gun in hand. The muzzle flashed once, the shot splitting the night. The plank beside me splintered. I dropped behind a bollard and fired back. The sound rolled across the river, echoing like thunder that meant it. Miss Carruthers crouched, covering her ears. The man advanced slowly, methodical. He wasn't one of the dock workers. His movements were too clean. I recognized that kind of confidence. It was Larimore himself, protecting his investment. He called out, voice cold, "Goodwin, you don't understand who you're stealing from." "Sure I do," I said. "The man whose company motto is death before audit." He fired again, grazing the metal beside my head. The angle gave me one clean view of him, expensive coat, steady grip, and eyes that had already written my obituary. I didn't give him the last line. A quick step to the left, another shot. He staggered, hit the railing, and dropped his gun. I was on him before he fell, kicking the weapon away. He breathed hard, hand clamped on his arm. "You don't know what this costs." "Sure I do," I said, holding up the folder. "Your career, your company, and maybe a headline or two." Behind us, sirens started up, the long, raw kind that belongs to Kramer's division. Either Saul had made the call, or Wolfe had predicted my bad habits again. Miss Carruthers ran forward, voice breaking. "That's him. That's the man who came to our apartment after John died." Larimore looked up at her, blood and contempt mixing. "Your brother was greedy. He wanted a cut." I pulled him upright. Save it for Wolfe. He enjoys confessions, especially the ones signed in ink instead of blood. 2 police cars skidded to a stop on the pier, headlights slicing through fog. Kramer climbed out, trench coat flapping, cigar already lit. "Goodwin," he barked. "You're supposed to let me arrest people, not audition for it." I handed him the papers. "Consider this an express delivery from Nero Wolfe Enterprises." He flipped through the top pages, his eyes widening despite himself. "Well, I'll be damned. You actually bagged a whale. Just don't let it slip back into the water." He motioned to his men. "Take them, every last one still breathing." Larimore didn't resist as they cuffed him. He just kept watching me like I'd ruined something personal. Kramer jerked his chin toward me. "You got any idea how much paperwork this'll be?" "Sure," I said. "But think of the promotion." He growled something that might have been gratitude and turned away. Miss Carruthers came beside me, shoulders shaking. "It's over, isn't it?" "Almost. Wolfe still needs to rearrange it into logic. That's his idea of dessert." Saul appeared through the fog, looking entirely unruffled. "You all right?" "Define it," I said, lowering the gun. "We're alive. The evidence isn't swimming, and Kramer's speechless." "That's a win." He nodded once. "Wolfe will expect you before breakfast. Then he'll get me before sleep." As the sirens faded into the distance, I took one last look at the freighter, the fraudulent Bordeaux Extra Reserve, and thought how small a man's empire looks when truth boards without permission. Kramer's men were still hustling bodies and barrels when Saul and I steered Miss Carruthers back toward the car. The sirens had thinned to a grumble, and the river wind was starting to smell like cold relief instead of murder. She hadn't spoken since Larimore went down. Her silence wasn't fear now. It was exhaustion settling where adrenaline had been renting space. "You can breathe," I said, opening the door for her. "They'll take it from here." She shook her head. "No, Wolfe needs the truth from me, not from their reports." "Lady," Saul said mildly, "you're going to make us all redundant." I grinned and started the engine. The tires hissed on wet asphalt, leaving the docks and their noise behind. The city at 2 a.m. is a different species, empty-eyed, listening. We drove through it, and I caught Saul watching the mirrors the whole way. He doesn't relax. He just runs out of things to suspect. When we reached the brownstone, Fritz's light was still on in the kitchen. Either Wolfe had kept him awake or Fritz's conscience wouldn't sleep while the house was half-staffed. We ushered Miss Carruthers in, dripping and pale, and I hung my hat where this whole circus had started. Wolfe's voice came from the office, sharp and awake. "Archie." "Report." I pushed the door open. He was at his desk, a globe of beer at his elbow, eyes fixed on me like I'd returned from a jungle expedition with either treasure or rabies. "You get both," I said. "Dane's under lock, Larimore's cuffed, and the cargo's singing hymns to customs. Kramer's writing his name in the sky." Wolfe gestured. "Spare me embroidery. Facts." So I gave him the list. The warehouse, the freighter, the smuggling, the forged manifests, and the little matter of a photo labeled "Insurance Paid in Advance." I dropped the case file on his desk. Saul leaned against the door frame, quiet as wallpaper. Wolfe turned a page, skimmed and exhaled through his nose. Ah, human avarice. It never disappoints. Miss Carruthers stepped forward. "Mr. Wolfe, my brother, he didn't die for money. He wanted to expose them. He believed people still cared about the truth." Wolfe's gaze lifted to her. "My dear Miss Carruthers, men rarely die for money. They die because of it. The distinction is grammatical, not moral." She flinched at that, but nodded once. I'd seen people argue with Wolfe's logic before. They never won, but sometimes they learned what defeat could look like with dignity. He reached for another document, his finger tapping the photo. This was his mistake, posing for posterity beside his enemy. Sentiment always overrules caution. John trusted people, she said quietly. Then he was sentimental. Wolfe sipped his beer, unimpressed by tragedy. Kramer will charge Larimore with conspiracy, fraud, and homicide. The evidence is sufficient. What remains unclear is why you were permitted to live after your brother's death. You had knowledge enough to imperil them. Her eyes lowered. I think Dane pitied me. He said once that hurting women made a mess. He disliked cleaning up. That, Wolfe said dryly, is not pity. It is cowardice shaped as gallantry. I broke in before she lost the last of her composure. Anyway, we've wrapped the smuggling ring, returned Kramer to his natural habitat, and the city's safe for another evening. Case closed. Wolfe's brows rose a quarter-inch. Closed? You presume much. There is a piece missing. He turned the folder toward me. On the last page, clipped to a bill of lading, was a torn corner of paper with faint pencil marks. Half of a signature. John Carruthers didn't die in his apartment, Wolfe said. He died on that ship. The gas story was posthumous theater. The time-stamp on this manifest proves he signed it hours after his supposed death. Someone else forged the rest. That stopped me cold. So Kramer's coroner was deceived, Wolfe finished. The corpse was moved, the leak arranged. Very simple, very effective. But it means another man assisted Dane and Larimore. A man with access to the building where Carruthers lived. Who might that be? Miss Carruthers looked up sharply. There's the superintendent, Mr. Reeve. He let the police in that morning. He said he'd smelled gas hours earlier. Convenient, Wolfe murmured. Archie, fetch Kramer. Tell him our net requires one more fish. I gave him a salute with my eyebrows and went for the phone. The inspector answered in a voice that already had too little sleep in it. What now, Goodwin? Don't tell me the mayor's involved. Not yet. But your gas leak coroner's about to blush. Wolfe says Carruthers was killed off-site, body replanted. We're recommending a Mr. Reeve for the supporting role. There was a pause long enough for a curse to grow teeth. You sure? Wolfe is, and I'm not arguing. All right, keep everyone there. I'm sending a car. I hung up and turned. Kramer's on his way with handcuffs still warm. Wolfe nodded once. Good. Fritz, brandy. Miss Carruthers sank into the red chair, exhaustion catching up at last. I can't believe it was Reeve. He used to bring John's mail. Killers often are industrious, Wolfe said. He likely delivered the note to Mr. Goodwin's hat as well. That got me. Reeve planted that. Wolfe's tone was level. Who else had keys, access, and knowledge of your habits? The handwriting imitated a woman's, but the pressure was uneven, too deliberate, an unskilled mimic. Then it wasn't her after all, I said, glancing at Miss Carruthers. No, Wolfe said. She was guilty of faith, not forgery. For the first time that night, her eyes filled. You mean I led him straight to you? You led him into consequence, Wolfe corrected. A rarer destination. Saul gave a small nod from the door. Car outside. Kramer's punctual for once. Wolfe drained his glass. Escort him in, Saul. Mr. Goodwin, remain. I would observe the convergence of confession and coercion. A moment later, the front door opened and Kramer filled the hall like an approaching storm. His coat dripped on Fritz's rug, which meant Fritz would scowl for 3 days. Behind him came 2 officers and a man in a janitor's coat, his face damp and gray. Reeve. Kramer didn't bother with greetings. Wolfe, you better be right. I dragged this guy out of bed. Then he should be grateful, Wolfe said mildly. Sleep is often a privilege undeserved. He pointed to the manifest. Your prisoner's handwriting matches the forged segment. He completed the false signature, then assisted in relocating the body to the apartment. Reeve's mouth opened, shut, then opened again. You can't prove? I already have, Wolfe said. The pencil used to write that note under Mr. Goodwin's hat is a carpenter's grade, common to toolboxes. Yours contains the same brand, with a break consistent with that stroke. Inspector. Kramer turned to the officers. Take him. Reeve lunged once, pure panic, but Saul's hand on his shoulder ended the motion. The cuffs clicked, neat as punctuation. Kramer exhaled, lighting another cigar from the stump of the first. That it? You done rewriting my case reports? For tonight, Wolfe said. Miss Carruthers rose. So it's finished. Wolfe inclined his head. Justice is never finished, Miss Carruthers. It merely changes readers. Kramer muttered. You talk like a judge who charges by the metaphor, and marched his prisoners out. The door shut behind them, leaving the brownstone quiet again except for rain against the windows. Wolfe leaned back, eyelids lowering, and gave me the smallest nod. Archie, the hat, he said. I looked at it, still hanging by the door, perfectly ordinary again. What about it? It began the case. Let it end it. I smiled, lifted it down, and placed it on my head. Then here's to the most useful accessory a man ever owned. Pooh, Wolfe murmured. Next time, try a brain. Wolfe didn't move for a full minute after Kramer left. The quiet had a thickness to it, the kind that settles in once the noise of justice packs up and goes home. I stood by the door, hat still in hand, wondering if the case was finished or just folded neatly for storage. He broke the silence first. Archie, remove that absurd thing before it restores my headache. I hung it back on the rack, the brim still damp from the night. It's got seniority now, solved one murder and survived another. I might frame it. Frame yourself instead, Wolfe said. It would be more decorative. Miss Carruthers gave a faint, exhausted smile, the first real one I'd seen since she walked through our door. She'd been through enough grief and bullets for 1 week, but Wolfe wasn't the type to grant sentimental discharge papers. He poured her a brandy anyway, which in his world counted as tenderness. She took it with both hands. I don't know how to thank you. Wolfe waved that away. Gratitude is superfluous. Payment will suffice. Her eyes widened. I cut in fast. He doesn't mean that the way it sounds. He just can't let decency ruin his image. He ignored me. You will, of course, be called as a witness. The evidence is sound, and the district attorney will pursue it with vigor. She nodded slowly. I suppose I'll have to testify about everything. John's call, the note, the night watchman. Yes. Omit nothing. Precision is your ally now. Saul had disappeared into the kitchen to debrief Fritz over midnight coffee, leaving the three of us in that strange aftertaste that follows a clean victory. Only Wolfe never really savored them. He dissected them, as if joy were an unclassified germ. I sank into the chair opposite him. You'll forgive me for saying it, but I'm still not clear how you pinned Reeve without seeing him. Wolfe reached for the folder and tapped it once. Observation through inference, Archie. The handwriting alone was sufficient. Sure, but you never saw the guy's penmanship until Kramer dragged him in. He gave me the look usually reserved for someone trying to teach arithmetic to a cat. I saw the note from your hat, did I not? Its peculiar rhythm, firm on downstrokes, hesitant on curves, indicated a hand trained to sign, not to write. Such a hand belongs to men who fill forms, not letters. Add access to your hat and to Miss Carruthers' building, and the culprit emerged with all the subtlety of mildew. Elegant, I said. You should patent that method. I already have, he murmured. It is called thinking. That was my cue to shut up before wit became a casualty. Miss Carruthers set her empty glass on the desk. Mr. Wolfe, may I ask one thing? If John hadn't been my brother, if it were just another case, would you still have cared? He studied her with that unreadable half-focus he reserves for rare orchids and dangerous women. Madam, I care for nothing beyond coherence. But coherence requires truth, and truth, however unpleasant, is an intoxicant I cannot resist. So yes, I would have cared. She held his gaze for a second longer, then rose. Then I owe you both more than money. I stood too. Let me see you to a cab. Wolfe made a small sound, halfway between disapproval and digestion. Archie, ensure she reaches home unmolested. If Kramer's men fail to guard the building, employ Saul's vigilance and Fritz's revolver. Sure, I'll bring the house-petting zoo. She managed a faint laugh at that, which was worth the trip downstairs. The city had quieted into its late-hour rhythm, where even taxis seemed to whisper. I flagged one, and she climbed in. Before the door closed, she said, "You were right. Truth does have a cost. I hope it was worth what you paid." I tipped my hat. In my line, the receipts are always soggy. The cab disappeared into the drizzle, tail lights glowing like distant punctuation marks. I stood there a moment, watching the streetlight glisten on wet pavement, then headed back inside. When I re-entered the office, Wolfe was still planted behind his desk, reading the manifest again as if it might sprout new crimes under different lighting. The beer glass was refilled. "Fritz is doing." I said, "She's safe." Cab driver looked less homicidal than average. "Good," Wolfe muttered, without looking up. I dropped into my chair and stretched. "You know, there's one thing that still doesn't line up. Dane said he sent the first note himself, yet he couldn't have known I'd wear that hat that day. You really think Reeve did the handwriting, or was someone else doing the footwork?" Wolfe's eyes lifted, slow and deliberate. "Reeve delivered it, but I suspect Larimore dictated the message. It fits his pattern, delegated menace, personally detached. Which explains why he looked so shocked when Kramer cuffed him. He'd built the kind of empire that keeps hands clean and consciences outsourced." "Exactly," Wolfe said. His error was aesthetic. He mistook indirection for invisibility. Poetic, coming from a man who never leaves his chair. That earned me a small, rare smirk. Archie, if I were invisible, the world would be safer but infinitely duller. Fritz's head appeared around the doorway. "Mr. Wolfe, breakfast in 3 hours." "2," Wolfe said. "A case as indigestible as this requires eggs sooner." Fritz nodded and vanished, his footsteps soft as resignation. I leaned back and watched Wolfe stare at the photo of Carruthers and Larimore. "You know," I said, "for a story that started with a note in my hat, it wrapped up neatly." "Neatness," he said, "is not the measure of justice, only of endings. Still, I'll take it. We've had cases end in explosions, kidnappings, and unpaid invoices. A signed confession and a dry carpet count as luxury." He didn't argue. The clock ticked its approval from the mantel. Outside, a cab horn gave one short, lonely bleat, then the rain took over again. For a moment, the world felt balanced, the kind of fragile calm that follows truth like a truce no one trusts. Wolfe tilted back his chair, eyes closing. "Archie," he murmured, "remind me to have that hat burned tomorrow." I smiled. "Sure, but I'm keeping the ashes." The chair creaked as Wolfe tilted it farther back, which was his way of saying the world could end as long as it waited until he finished thinking. I stayed put, feet on the corner of the desk, letting the rhythm of the rain set the metronome for silence. It would have stayed that way too, except the phone on his desk broke into a shrill monologue. He opened one eye. "Archie," I picked up. "Nero Wolfe's office, where we specialize in headaches with paperwork." A male voice, low and cautious. "Mr. Goodwin, this is Officer Heller, from Inspector Kramer's detail. We're still down at the pier. Thought you'd want to know something." I straightened. "If it's about my hat, I've already retired it." "Not that. We did a deeper sweep of the freighter, found another body. That did it." "Another who?" "Dock foreman named Gable, shot clean through the chest. Looks fresh, maybe an hour ago. Too clean for the scuffle you boys had earlier." Whoever did it came back after you left." I glanced at Wolfe. His eyelids were half open now, which in his universe meant DEFCON 1. "You sure it's not one of the guys Kramer cuffed?" "Positive. Gable wasn't on our list. Guess he decided to tidy up what was left of the smuggling mess, and someone beat him to it." "Any leads?" "Just one thing. A torn scrap of paper in his hand. Looks like a receipt from a florist." I blinked. "A florist?" "Yeah. Name on it says Rexford Blooms. Mean anything to you?" "Not yet, but give it a minute." He exhaled. "We'll hold the scene until the inspector gets back from the precinct. Thought you might want to pass it to Wolfe." "Consider it passed." I hung up and turned to the boss. "Kramer's night just got a sequel. They found a dead dock foreman with a florist receipt clutched in his hand. And unless the flowers shot him, someone's still gardening this mess." Wolfe groaned. "The kind that starts low and ends in Latin. Pui. I should have known the soil was not yet barren." "Any reason a dock worker would be holding a receipt for daisies?" He rubbed his temple. "Possibly to remind us that corruption, like rot, requires tending. Or perhaps merely because someone wished to hide evidence in a bouquet." "You want me to find out which?" He sighed as if I'd offered him spinach. "Obviously. Take the car. Rexford Blooms will be open for deliveries at this hour only if someone there values money over morals." I grabbed my coat. "And if they value bullets over business." "Then," he said, "you will earn your salary retroactively." I gave him a mock salute and stepped into the rain again. The city had thickened into fog and fatigue. The streets glistened under streetlights that had stopped caring. The florist's shop was 8 blocks west, near the edge of the garment district, a stretch that never quite sleeps but dreams in neon. The sign for Rexford Blooms flickered weakly above a shuttered window. I rang once. No answer. Rang again. Then I saw the light, a thin strip under the back door, moving shadows inside. The knob wasn't locked. That's the kind of security you get when your clientele mostly buy forget-me-nots for funerals. I pushed it open and stepped into a humidity that smelled of damp stems and cigarette smoke. A man was bent over a counter, arranging flowers that didn't need arranging. Tall, wiry, mid-40s, coat too sharp for dirt work. He looked up slow, hands still busy. "Store's closed." "I'm not buying petals. Just conversation." "Conversation costs more." I flipped my license from the pocket. No badge. But the Nero Wolfe letterhead has scared tougher men. "You sold flowers tonight. Cash. Customer's name was Gable." His eyes narrowed. "Maybe I did. Maybe I sell to half the docks. Half of them don't end up perforated. He's dead." That froze him, just a blink too long. "You're sure?" "Kramer's men found him, still clutching your receipt like a valentine. Now, unless he was ordering roses for St. Peter, you're going to tell me why." He hesitated, fingers tightening around a stem until it snapped. "He came in around midnight. Nervous. Wanted a bouquet, white lilies. Said it was for an apology." "Apology to who?" "He didn't say, but he asked me to tuck something inside, an envelope. Sealed." "Still got a copy?" "No." His voice was a shade too quick. I handed it back. He left in a hurry. "Who paid him to deliver it?" He looked down at the shredded flower in his hand. "Guy in a grey raincoat. Came in earlier, bought the lilies. Said his friend would pick them up later. Paid double." That made the gears click in my head. "Grey coat, broad shoulders?" He nodded. "Yeah. You know him?" "Let's say we've danced." I reached across and grabbed the receipt pad. One carbon copy missing, the page beneath smudged with the imprint of handwriting. I held it under the counter lamp and tilted it. The shadow of words appeared. "Deliver to 9 Walthor West, A. Goodwin." That stopped the world for half a heartbeat. I stared at it, then at him. "You're sure that's the same order?" He read my face, went pale. "I don't want trouble. You've already got it." The bell over the front door jingled. Both our heads turned. A silhouette filled the glass. A man's tall, hat pulled low. The florist whispered, "That's him." I moved fast, slipping behind a shelf of potted orchids. The man stepped inside, shaking rain from his coat. His voice was quiet, precise. "Evening, Mr. Rexford. My friend left something for me." Rexford tried to bluff. "Shop's closed." The stranger ignored that, eyes scanning the room until they landed on the counter. Then he saw the receipt book, and his hand went inside his coat. I came out of hiding and pressed my revolver against his spine. "Leave the pockets alone. You can pick up your flowers in court." He froze, muscles coiled but smart enough not to test luck. I spun him around, and the face hit me like déjà vu. It was the same dock worker we'd seen run at the warehouse before Saul winged him. Only this time the wound on his shoulder was neatly bandaged and the smirk was intact. "Well, well," I said. "Thought you'd taken the night off." He sneered. "You should have stayed retired, Goodwin. The girl's next." That ended the conversation part. He lunged, knocking the lamp aside. The bulb shattered. Darkness bloomed. I hit him once across the jaw, felt him stagger into a table, glass breaking somewhere. He swung back, caught my ribs. Pain lit up my side like fireworks. We struggled in the dark, feet slipping on spilled water. I slammed him into the doorframe hard enough to make the bell jangle again, then pinned him with the revolver muzzle under his chin. "Say good night politely," I said. He spat blood and grinned. "You're already too late." I tightened my grip. "For what?" He laughed, low and ugly. "She's got the wrong bouquet." Before I could translate that into sense, he twisted, wrenching his shoulder, and threw himself backward through the doorpane. The glass exploded, rain rushing in with him. I lunged out into the street, but he was already gone, just wet footprints and the echo of running boots. Rexford's voice came behind me, shaky. What did he mean? The wrong bouquet? I didn't answer. My hand went to my pocket, finding the faint crease of that earlier florist note, the handwriting that had started everything. The curve of the letters matched what I'd just seen on the pad. Miss Carruthers had gone home with a cab, and maybe a delivery she wasn't expecting. I was halfway to the car before I realized Wolfe had probably known this was coming. He always does. I started the engine, slammed it into gear, and tore through the wet streets, the city blurring past like ink running in the rain. The tires chewed puddles off 10th Avenue, and the wipers beat like a nervous metronome. Every light felt red, every block too long. The florist's words played back in my head. The wrong bouquet. Miss Carruthers' cab had pulled out of here less than an hour ago, headed for her apartment, and someone with a sense of theater had decided flowers made a good delivery system. I took a corner hard and called Kramer's precinct from the car phone Wolfe had grudgingly installed for emergencies. If this didn't qualify, nothing did. A half-asleep operator patched me through to the desk sergeant. "This is Archie Goodwin, working with Nero Wolfe. Get a patrol to 74th the Carruthers residence. Fast." The sergeant yawned audibly. "We already cleared that address tonight. You want us waking the neighbors again?" "Only if you like them alive," I snapped, and killed the line. The engine growled through the wet streets like it shared my mood. When I reached her building, the lobby lights were still on. That looked harmless enough, except the elevator cage stood open on the ground floor, door ajar, no operator. I drew my gun, pressed the call button, and listened. Somewhere above, faint music floated down. A radio, a woman's voice singing soft and off-key. The fourth-floor hallway smelled of lilies. That was my first clue and my least favorite. The door to her apartment was half closed, a strip of yellow light spilling into the hall. I nudged it open with the muzzle of the revolver. "Miss Carruthers." No answer. Just the ticking of a clock and that same faint melody, coming from her kitchen radio. I moved inside, eyes sweeping the room. The bouquet sat in the center of the table, white lilies gleaming like ghosts in a glass vase. A card stuck among them, with apologies. I approached slow, expecting the punchline to smell like chloroform, but the flowers looked clean. No discoloration, no strange residue. I leaned close anyway. The scent was sweet, heavy, almost dizzying. That was enough for me to step back and pull a handkerchief over my nose. There was a soft sound behind me, a breath or a footstep. I turned fast. The shape in the doorway froze mid-motion, broad-shouldered, raincoat dripping, revolver leveled. "Don't," he said. The voice was familiar. The same guy from the florist shop, now minus the smirk. His left arm hung stiff at his side, the bandaged one. "You've got persistence," I told him. "But lousy timing." He moved closer. "Drop the gun." I didn't. "Those lilies yours? Nice touch. I'd have gone with carnations. Cheaper, less homicidal." He smiled, just enough to show he thought this was fun. "She opened the door for them, didn't even question it. I told the delivery boy to say they came from you." That one landed like a punch. "So she's breathing. For now. She fainted from the fumes. I came to make sure it stayed that way." He took another step. I caught a whiff of the flowers again. Stronger now. My head started to feel light. Gasoline laced with perfume. That's what it was. The petals glistened, damp with whatever cocktail he'd cooked up. "You mind telling me what your employer promised you?" I said, keeping him talking while I edged sideways. "Employer's dead," he said flatly. "That's why I'm here. Larimore left instructions. If things went bad, no witnesses. Meaning her and me. Meaning whoever's breathing near the evidence." He raised his gun a fraction. I kicked the table hard, sending the vase flying. It hit the floor, shattered, and the liquid splashed across his shoes. His reflexes did me a favor. He glanced down, just long enough for me to dive behind the couch and squeeze off one shot. The bullet clipped the lamp, showering sparks. He fired back, too high, then lunged for the door. I was up fast, cutting him off. He swung the gun like a club. It grazed my jaw and sent the room into fireworks. I grabbed his wrist, twisted until something popped, and the revolver clattered across the floor. He went for my throat, and we hit the table together, knocking chairs sideways. The smell of lilies grew thicker, stinging my eyes. He caught a knee to my ribs. I answered with an elbow to his face. He went down but kicked out, connecting with my shin. The next thing I knew, he was scrambling toward the hall. "Stop!" He didn't. I fired once. The shot hit wood, not flesh, but it stopped him long enough for the cavalry to arrive. Kramer's cavalry, judging by the voice that thundered from the doorway. "Goodwin, you'd better not be shooting up. Another apartment." 2 uniforms barreled in behind him. They tackled the guy before he could make it 10 feet. He went down hard, still snarling. Kramer turned to me. "You all right?" "I've been worse, and you took your sweet time." He glanced around, sniffed. "What's that smell?" "Poison, probably. Ask your chem lab. Those flowers were rigged to turn Miss Carruthers into a late bouquet herself." He stared at the shattered vase, then at the guy in cuffs. "Who's he?" "Cleanup crew, Larimore's last loyal employee." Kramer grunted. "Typical. The boss is in a cell, and his hired help still thinks he's got a pension plan." I moved to the couch where Miss Carruthers lay, still out cold but breathing steady. Her skin was pale, lips tinted faint blue, but her pulse was there, weak, rhythmic. "Get a medic," I said. One of the uniforms dashed off. Kramer watched me check her breathing. "You're getting sentimental, Goodwin." "She's allergic to dying," I said. "It brings down the tone of the neighborhood." He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to snarl or smile. "You and Wolfe keep this up. I'll need a whole squad just to follow your paperwork trail. Think of it as job security." He exhaled through his cigar, the tip flaring. "Fine, you got your hero moment. Now let me clean up. I stood, rubbing my jaw where the thug's gun had made acquaintance. Don't forget the florist. Rexford Blooms. He's an accessory, maybe under duress, but he knows more. Already sent a car. Anything else? Yeah, I said, glancing at the lilies. Tell your evidence boys not to sniff too close. He nodded to the medics who'd arrived, then jerked a thumb toward the hall. Go home before I decide to interview you under oath. That sounded like permission. I waited until they carried her out, oxygen mask in place, then followed the last uniform to the street. The rain had eased into mist again, that in-between weather where New York looks like it's thinking of something it won't say. I got into the car and sat for a second, watching the ambulance lights spin red across the wet pavement. I could already picture Wolfe's expression when I walked in, half triumph, half indigestion. He'd say, "Pfui, call me a fool for heroics," then demand the chemical analysis before breakfast. The ambulance pulled away and I started the engine. The hat was still on the seat beside me, waiting like a punctuation mark. I put it on, tilted the brim against the drizzle, and headed back to the brownstone. One more night intact, one more mystery folded shut just enough for Wolfe to pry it open again. The brownstone's front steps were slick and shining when I got there, and the hour was somewhere between fatigue and sunrise. I pushed through the door and found the house exactly as I'd left it. Too quiet, too composed, smelling faintly of Fritz's war with onions. Wolfe's office. Light was still burning, which meant he'd either been waiting up or had decided sleep was for simpler organisms. I walked in without knocking. He was where you'd expect. Mass anchored behind the desk, book open, beer glass sweating like a conscience. He didn't look up when I entered, just said, "You've returned. Alive. Excellent." "That's an accurate summary," I said, tossing my hat onto the couch. Miss Carruthers nearly turned into a funeral arrangement, courtesy of Larimore's leftover employee. But she's breathing, and Kramer's got the would-be florist under wraps. "Describe," he said. I did, short and fast. The bouquet, the fumes, the fight, and the bullet that might have improved my haircut if I'd been taller. Wolfe's expression didn't change through any of it, but the corners of his mouth twitched once, which in his language translated to, "You've done acceptably." When I finished, he leaned back, fingertips steepled. "It was inevitable," he said. "Larimore's organization could not end with him alone. Parasites rarely die with their host." "He almost took her down as a parting gift," I said. "If I'd been 10 minutes slower, she'd be headline material." He nodded once, slow. "And yet she lives. Kramer will trumpet his efficiency, the newspapers will misattribute heroism, and you—" He gestured toward me with a lazy hand. "We'll polish your halo until it blinds the office." I'd settle for breakfast. "Fritz," he called toward the kitchen. "Eggs, coffee, and, yes, 2 portions. I dropped into my chair, rubbing the bruise along my jaw. "So, case closed for real this time." He made a small sound, halfway between a snort and a sigh. "For law, perhaps. For truth, not entirely." "Meaning?" He turned the photo of Carruthers and Larimore around on the desk, eyes tracing the edges. "I dislike unfinished mosaics. There remains the question of motive beyond profit. Larimore wanted money, Dane wanted survival, Reeve wanted a paycheck. That covers it." "No," he said, "it does not. Carruthers's notebook contained more than shipping ledgers. It held correspondence, personal letters. I saw the references when Kramer's men inventoried them. Among them was a note signed E.L., expressing regret. It was addressed not to John Carruthers, but to his sister. That pulled me upright. Larimore wrote to Helen. Yes, the tone was intimate. Wolfe's eyelids lowered in distaste. He was entangled with her, perhaps briefly, perhaps sincerely. When her brother discovered it, he confronted Larimore. That confrontation led to death. Business provided the opportunity, but emotion supplied the catalyst. I let that settle. So all the smuggling, the fraud, it's just the wallpaper. The real fire started over her. Precisely, Wolfe said, which is why she must never know. She's smart enough to figure it out eventually. Then she will suffer the customary punishment for intelligence. Fritz appeared with a tray, saving me from replying. He set down eggs that steamed like truce offerings. Wolfe began eating immediately, a sure sign he considered the moral half of the case complete. I forked in silence for a while, watching him work through his first bite as if tasting evidence. "You're not planning to tell Kramer about that letter, are you?" He shook his head. Kramer is a man of justice, not subtlety. He would brand it scandal and parade it as motive. The public gains nothing from it. Miss Carruthers gains ruin. The case is resolved without it. I leaned back, chewing that over with my coffee. "You know, for a man who hates sentiment, you've got a funny way of protecting it." He looked at me, eyes sharp but not angry. "You mistake preference for principle. I do not despise sentiment. I merely distrust it. Tonight, it deserves quarantine." That was as close as he'd ever get to kindness, and I knew better than to press it. The clock on the mantel coughed its 4:30 into the room. The city outside had begun its low hum again. Trucks, pigeons, the distant groan of another day warming up. Wolfe dabbed his lips, pushed the plate away, and leaned back with that look that means he's turning the page in his head. "Archie, file this one under domestic entanglements. Subcategory, lethal, and write the summary succinctly. The client remains alive. That is sufficient justification for the work. You planning to send her a bill?" He gave a faint grunt. "Of course, my charity is strictly horticultural." "She'll pay it," I said. "She's the type who needs the closure official." "She will also bring flowers," he muttered. That caught me. "You think she'll—" "Yes. Survivors cling to symbols." I was about to answer when the doorbell rang. One sharp note, the kind that doesn't apologize for the hour. Wolfe's eyebrows rose 0.5 centimeter. "Archie." I went, already half expecting the uniform cap outside. It wasn't a cop. Helen Carruthers stood there instead, still pale, hair damp from the mist. "You're supposed to be in a hospital bed," I said. "They released me. I couldn't sleep without knowing." "Knowing what?" "If it's really over." I didn't have the heart to argue. I brought her in. Wolfe didn't rise, but his tone softened a degree. "Miss Carruthers, you should not be abroad at this hour. I needed to thank you." She looked from him to me, then back again. "They told me you saved my life. Twice." "Once was sufficient," Wolfe said. "The second was mostly your own doing." She hesitated. "And John? Did he suffer?" Wolfe's pause was long enough to hurt. "Briefly," he said, "but not in vain. His courage preserved others." She breathed out slowly, relief mixed with something heavier. "Then I can live. With that," he inclined his head. "You should. You have earned peace." She turned to me then, smile faint but real. "Mr. Goodwin, if you ever tire of detective work, you'd make a very good liar." "Practice," I said, "and bad company." She left as quietly as she'd come, footsteps soft against the floor. I closed the door after her and looked back at Wolfe. He was staring at the orchids by the window. "A remarkable woman," he said. "I hope she forgets." "Forget what?" "Enough." He reached for another beer, poured it with care, and gestured toward the door. "Go to bed, Archie. You've earned a few hours of unconsciousness." I lingered a second. "You ever get tired of being right?" "Constantly," he said, "but I endure." The rain had stopped by the time I headed upstairs. I paused at the top landing and glanced back through the office doorway. Wolfe sat motionless under the lamplight, framed by the gold glow of his orchids, a man content only when the world made grudging sense again. On the rack, my hat hung where it always did, ordinary, unassuming, and probably the most expensive piece of felt in New York that week. I touched the brim, muttered goodnight to it, and went to bed knowing I'd never be able to look at flowers the same way again. The morning came on grey and grudging, the kind that makes even coffee look defensive. I hadn't slept more than an hour before Fritz's knock and Wolfe's voice called me back to the land of consequence. The smell of orchid pollen drifted through the house. Wolfe's equivalent of a war trumpet. He was already at the desk when I stumbled in, waistcoat buttoned, mind sharper than any breakfast deserved. A folded newspaper lay before him, headline large enough to gloat, "Larimore ring broken, woman survives poison plot." "You've seen it," he said. "Hard to miss," I muttered, dropping into my chair. "They got your name right for once, even spelled it without adjectives." He looked offended. "Adjectives are the refuge of mediocrity." "Kramer says hello," I added, "and something about you being the most insufferable man alive." That is, of course, a tautology. I grinned, but the smile didn't stay. "So that's it? Curtain down?" Wolfe's gaze moved to the window where the rain had left streaks like fingerprints. "It never is. The stage clears, the actors change, the play repeats. Humanity is depressingly consistent." That was Wolfe in the morning, half philosopher, half undertaker. I was reaching for the coffee pot when the bell rang again. Fritz appeared a moment later with a card on a tray. "Miss Helen Carruthers," he said. "She insists." Wolfe sighed like the word itself owed him rent. "Show her in." She entered wearing the calm of someone who decided not to break again. The color had returned to her face, but her eyes carried that post-war stillness that comes from surviving one too many truths. She held an envelope. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin." Wolfe inclined his head. "Miss Carruthers." "I came to return this." She placed the envelope on his desk. "It was among John's things. After the police finished. I think you should see it before I destroy it." Wolfe studied her for a long moment, then opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, unmistakably Larimore's. He read in silence, lips tightening as he reached the final line, then handed it to me. It wasn't long. "Helen, if John discovers what we've done, he'll never forgive either of us. I never meant for it to reach him, but Dane has no discretion, and guilt has its own handwriting. Burn this. I'll fix it. No signature. Just the scrawl of panic." I placed it back on the desk. "So it's true." She nodded. "I loved him once. I thought I hated him for what he became. But I see now he died trying to protect me from it." Wolfe folded the letter once, then twice, before sliding it into his drawer. "This will remain unseen. History is better served by forgetting the color of its stains." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "Thank you." "You are leaving the city?" he asked. "Yes. I have an aunt in Vermont. Orchards, not orchids." "Wise," he said. "The earth heals by simplicity." She managed a faint smile. "And you, Mr. Wolfe? How do you heal?" He looked genuinely puzzled. "I eat breakfast." That earned a soft laugh. She extended her hand. Wolfe hesitated a fraction before taking it. "Goodbye," she said, turning to me. "And thank you for the nights I survived because you wouldn't stop talking." "Occupational hazard," I said. "I only shut up for bullets." When she left, the door closed with a kind of finality that doesn't belong to sound, only to silence. Wolfe exhaled slowly, as though he'd just balanced an equation he didn't like. "Archie," he said, "burn the copy I made of that letter." "You sure? It ties the motive neatly." "Motives are overrated," he said. "They change nothing but perspective. Carruthers is avenged, the guilty are buried or confined, and Miss Carruthers may yet learn to forgive herself. The rest is irrelevant." I took the paper from his drawer, lit a match, and watched the flame nibble away at guilt until it folded into ash. The smoke curled upward, pale and temporary, and for a moment it looked like the case leaving the room. Wolfe leaned back, closing his eyes. "You are uncharacteristically silent, Archie." "Just thinking." "Dangerous habit." "Yeah, but sometimes productive. You knew from the start, didn't you, that the note wasn't meant as a warning. It was confession disguised as caution." He didn't open his eyes. It was obvious. Only those complicit in guilt fear the object of it. The note was an attempt at absolution, written in graphite. Poorly composed, but sincere. I stared at the fading embers in the ashtray. So she was never really in danger until they decided she remembered too much. Precisely. We sat there, the kind of quiet that has gravity. Outside, a delivery truck clattered past. The morning had officially declared itself alive again. Wolfe reached for his beer. "Archie, do you know why I tolerate you? I keep the place tidy and the checks from bouncing." He ignored that. "Because you embody contradiction, recklessness married to loyalty, wit alloyed with integrity. You make chaos useful." "That's almost flattering," I said. "You feeling sentimental?" "Indigestion," he corrected. "Kindly fetch the mail." I stood, shaking my head. "You know, one of these days you're going to admit you enjoy the company." "Pfui," he said without heat. I brought him the morning envelope stack. He sorted through them with the usual disdain until his fingers paused on one wrapped in plain brown paper. The return address was blank. "From whom?" I asked. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a single object, my hat, cleaned, brushed, and wrapped with a ribbon of white lilies. For once, Wolfe's composure cracked. One brow arched toward the ceiling. An unsubtle gesture. I took it, staring at the flowers. "From her, you think?" "Who else? A farewell in symbols. The past acknowledged, the future left unstated. Nice of her to give it back. I was getting sentimental about the thing." "Then replace it," he said. "It has acquired too much meaning. Objects should serve, not linger." I set it on the rack anyway. "Sorry, boss. This one stays." He sighed. "You are impossible." Trained by the best. He closed his eyes again, retreating to whatever quiet place geniuses go when the noise of life grows too reasonable. Fritz's voice drifted from the kitchen, announcing breakfast. I leaned on the doorframe, watching the man who could dissect humanity like a watch and still grumble that the gears made too much noise. "Wolfe," I said. "Yes." "You ever think we win too often?" His eyelids didn't move. "One cannot win against nature, Archie. Only postpone loss." I smiled, tipping the brim of my reclaimed hat. "Then here's to the postponement business." He didn't answer, but his mouth twitched. The ghost of amusement, maybe pride. The morning light reached across the orchids, painting them gold, and I turned away, heading toward the smell of Fritz's coffee and the start of another day.